Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Shall we get started? So first of all, my name is Eric Malice. I am the Chief Product Officer and also the co-founder here at National Test Systems. Ever since my brother and I started the company back in 2001, over 21 years now, I'll have to change the slide. Over 21 years now, I've been in this business. Ever since I got into the business, I'd always been more interested in the science behind the business than the business behind the business. In other words, my brother, he was great with marketing and sales and inventory and management, all this other stuff. I just wanted to focus on learning as much as I could about really all things clinical toxicology, how the drugs work, how your body reacts to drugs, how the tests work, how they react to the drugs, really all things clinical toxicology, but especially what we do, which is drug testing, collective we. So tonight is another of our ongoing series of educational webinars. And the reason we do these is because we think education is hugely important. Anyone can sell you a cup, but we think supporting it, including educating about the product that you're using, educating about the drugs that you're seeing, educating really all things. I will say that I'm not going to teach the healthcare workers who are out there, how to run your facilities and how to treat your patients, your clients. But I'm going to bring you every piece of helpful information to make sure you can do your best job. Make sure your daily drug testing duties are a little easier or at least a little bit more insightful. And that really goes for everyone too. There's just some people who have a little more expertise on that side of the screen than this side of the screen. But for all questions for this side of the screen, I will be your go-to guy. So we've got about a 15-minute webinar or so, after which we will do a question and answer session. If you'll see on the left pane, you have the first button is people, so you can see who's watching with you. Then you have questions, which is more like questions is where I would like you to direct any question you may have. And what I will do is I wait to the end of the presentation, and then we're going to go back and get any questions that are in that questions section. The chat section, if you want to chat amongst yourself, somebody's having a technical issue and you think someone here that's watching this with you might be able to help you. I've seen some pretty friendly and helpful people in our chat windows in the past. So, if you've got a question that is more related to, hey, why are my speakers not working? Maybe there is someone in there that can help you. But if you got questions related to the topic, please put them in the questions section. And that's where I'm going to be focusing once the slideshow is over. So as far as that goes, as far as questions go, for some reason that we don't get to everybody's questions today, which is unlikely, but just in case, regardless, your consultant will be reaching out to you in the next couple of days. And number one, getting to any questions you may have missed, or may have missed, I should say. At that time, they'll also give you an opportunity to suggest topics for future webinars. They'll give you an opportunity to request a training 101 or with me and your entire staff, either on this topic or any other topic that you think might be helpful to you and your staff. Not necessarily so much on this particular webinar that we're doing today, but I know a lot of the webinars, I'm trying to cram a lot of a shallow dive into some of these topics because I want to get as much information as out there. So I've had plenty of trainings where someone had said, hey, during the fentanyl webinar, you talked about carfentanil. I want to know more about carfentanil. Great. Schedule training. We put together another presentation if need be, or just do a question answer section. So again, this isn't the entirety of the information. This is what we decide is best to get out there for the general knowledge. And then again, later give you an opportunity to come back and ask for a deeper dive, or just call me and say, hey, what did you mean, Eric? I didn't understand what you said on that one thing. That's great. That's what we're here for. Offering training and providing educational resources and a platform, I think, is really what sets us apart from every other vendor out there who's doing a similar type of business. And just by the sheer number of you here, and I see a lot of familiar names on here, which I'm really, really excited about, it looks like I'm not the only one that thinks this way. It looks like you guys are, if not appreciative, at least interested enough to want to join us and see really what this is all about and see if you can gain some insight to make your job a little bit easier every day. So what are we talking about today? Today we're going to be discussing what I'm calling state of designer opiates. Designer opiates is a term that I just made up a month ago when I decided on the topic. I don't think we're going to find a true textbook definition of what a designer opiate is, but I'll peel back the curtain a little as we go, and you'll understand more about why I've chosen to designate these drugs as such. The first one we're going to talk about is isotonitazine. Probably just going to refer that to as ISO going forward. It took me a long time to learn how to pronounce that, and I still don't get it right every time. Isotonitazine, so keep that in mind. The other one we're going to talk about today is something called U47700. The other thing we're going to talk about today is W18, which for reasons I'll get to doesn't quite fit this niche, but it was worth bringing into this conversation. And lastly, a subject who I'm sure is very common to you guys and definitely could have its own webinar, which it does, is fentanyl. We'll bring a little bit of updating onto the fentanyl and how that ties into this topic that we're on today. So a little bit about my sources, which I usually like to give whenever it's especially very obvious. So in a perfect world, as the title of the slide says, that's because this chart you're seeing on the left side of the slide is a chart that the DEA releases, something called the Emerging Threat Report, that for the longest time they were reporting quarterly, semi-annually, and annually. Well, because there's so much information and there's so many new substances, especially that fall into the quote-unquote designer category, they are running behind. So this chart we're looking at here is from mid-year 2021. To give you an idea of effects over time, this mid-year 2020 had 1,392 identifications. And as you can see here, this one had 2,199. So just the sheer number of opioids that they're finding, the DEA is finding and compiling the information about, is increasing. All the data I can find from beyond that point indicates that, yes, it still is increasing. And as you can see on the list here, the first thing on our list is the U47700. Right below that is the isotonitazine. Below that, we have metanitazine, which is going to be another included in our conversation here today. And, if you look at the big picture, fentanyl's still the lion's share, 1,948 out of 2,199. And again, if we look at the 2022 mid-year, assuming it was out already, or I even settle for the end year 2021, we would see the trend continuing. And the most interesting thing here is heroin is only being found at about 22% of the identifications, again, as of this reporting period. So because this is not that current in the big grand scheme of things, it's like, and at least as far as trying to bring you guys current information, because it's not that current, I do a lot of additional research on the subjects myself, going through media reporting, going through police blotters, going through any little DEA bulletins I can find, anything that pertains to the topic at hand. So a lot of this I was able to round out and give newer information, but not in every case am I going to have, a nice handy chart like this to show you exactly what that is. So again, my other bullet points is designer drugs, and again, we'll explain that. And then fentanyl, just because that in the state of opioids, especially in the state of opioids now in this country, it's always a good idea to bring a little bit more information about fentanyl, just because it is, if not is, should be on the forefront of everybody's mind. So let's dive into it, shall we? So the first thing we're going to talk about is isotonitazine. Again, I'm going to stick to calling that ISO. So that and the one below it, meto, I have to abbreviate everything, or we'll be here all day with me trying to pronounce it. These are both substances that were what they call characterized. This is in 2011. And these are based on a substance called etonitazine. And that one dates all the way back to 1957. So firstly, what is it? It's an opioid analgesic. Opioid meaning it affects the opioid receptors in the human body. Analgesic meaning it relieves pain. So that almost fits every drug under category today. So while you'll see this point repeated, it's good to keep in mind exactly what it is that we're talking about. Excuse me. So what do I mean when I say that this was the substance ISO, for example, was characterized in 2011? These drugs weren't so much discovered as so much extrapolated from earlier versions of similar substances. the way they can model and test the model of certain molecules due to modern computing is incredible. They can basically put up the model of the human body, a model of this of the molecule that we're focusing on, and they have a pretty good idea of what this drug is going to do to the human body. Of course, you would never just give someone that drug without actually testing it. But as we'll see, a lot of these actually are. In fact, this one was not only never used as a medication, none of these, iso, meto, or eto, were never used as medications. These were never tested on humans. And again, while compared to fentanyl, it's not a huge number of IDs from the DEA chart. It's still a very dangerous opioid medication or opioid substance, and high potential for abuse, high potential for overdose. The good news about this one is it's been placed on the temporary schedule, DEA's temporary schedule 1 this year. Real quick on DEA drug scheduling. So basically the DEA sorts drugs into 5 categories, what they call schedules. And they range from 5 being the most innocuous, safest medications that have been used for, tens, hundreds of years without any serious side effects or addiction or anything like that, all the way to a class 1. And the class 1 medication has no acceptable medical use, has a high potential for abuse, high potential for harm, high potential for addiction. So luckily, while it's not permanent schedule 1 just yet, again, DEA does not do anything quickly, but at least we got it on temporary for now. So this isn't something you're going to find in a gas station. If you went to my last webinar about gas station dope, one thing about all the things we're going to talk about today, one thing in common is these are all drug scheduled at this point by the DEA, if not temporary, then permanently, which means you're not going to stroll into your local convenience store or head shop and find this on the counter. So if there's a silver lining in there anywhere, that's where this is. So next we can see we're going to talk about something called U47700. This one actually has a nickname. This one's called pink heroin or Pinky. This one is another opioid analgesic, and another one that was usually found in a powder or pressed into pills, usually made to look like counterfeits of other black market medications or black market drugs like Xanax and oxycodone usually. But again, you don't know what you're getting. You don't know if this is what you're buying on a pill on the street. So that's another reason all these things are also dangerous, is because most of these were never tested on humans. So this is another one that was developed as a research chemical. This was developed in the 70s. When they make a research chemical, it's similar to what they call an academic exercise. In other words, let's make this thing that our modeling thinks could be something, and let's really put it to the test. Maybe not on humans, but let's run it through all the models. Let's see if this is something that we can use as a pain reliever that's going to be less dangerous than a lot of the pain relievers that we have out there now. Morphine, fentanyl, and all, even the illicit ones. These are usually done in the hopes of finding a new breakthrough medication, not illicit substance. The U47700, again, based on modeling, has about 7 times the potency of morphine. So when you're talking about something like, like fentanyl, which is 50 times, it's not as dangerous in the big picture. But again, since these are all black market medications or black market substances, we don't really know what's in it. This one, again, has never been tested on humans. So it's definitely something you don't want to just mess around with. Like, oh, here's a pill, I'm not sure what it is. Yeah, that's never a good idea in this day and age. This one's been on permanent schedule 1 as of 2018. So that's another good. We're not seeing this one in the gas station either. This is an illicit substance. Next, we're going to talk about W18. So this one is our oddball because it's not actually an opioid. The reason I even put it in here, well, it's twofold, really. One, so I could give you my definition of a designer opioid. So in my mind, a designer opioid is one that was never made as a medication, fully synthetic, never, even for the most part, never tested on humans, although I have flexibility in that on that. And that's why these kind of all fit together. The other reason I put it on here is when we first saw reporting about W18 about 3-ish years ago, the very first articles that came out said, oh my God, new deadly opioid, more potent than fentanyl, blah, 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 blah. We get it. They always seem to jump the gun on reporting. I kind of held back, hoping I would get more information on it. Now you can find plenty of times that they have done what they call the mechanism of action. In other words, how the substance actually does what it does in your body, and found that it does not interact with the opioid sensors in your body, making it not an opioid at all. The reason it was thought to be an opioid is it had very similar effects as an opioid. You had your analgesia, you had your lowered pulse and blood pressure and heart rate. It was very much a sedative, much like every other opioid that we see. So I'll let the first reporting pass because it looked like it was an opioid. It was being sold in pills that were mimicked, that you can tell from the photo there, that's an 80 milligram oxycodone, although it's not. It's a W18 pressed to look like an 80 milligram oxycodone. So fitting it in this category, I think, is fair. I hope you'll allow that from me. This one, again, was synthesized solely for academic research, never tested on humans nor animals. And it was just done as an academic exercise. And let's see if we can build a new drug that will do something useful for society. Obviously, it didn't work, and it never even got tested on people. This was actually something that was done, again, in the 80s at the University of Alberta. And at the time, they synthesized a W1 through W32. They had 31 different versions of this to test to see if any of them would be as good or good enough to make into a medication. Obviously, none of those happened, and this isn't really that widely available anymore. So the good news is my additional research on the W18 shows me really, out of everything we're talking about today, this is probably the least likely to be showing up on your streets at this time. I would put those right now at the ISO or possibly the Meadow that we talked about on the first slide. Those are probably the most likely designer opioids that isn't fentanyl or some analog of fentanyl. So keep that in mind. And with that said, let's talk lastly about fentanyl. There's a couple of reasons I wanted to bring this up. Number one reason I wanted to bring this up is because of rainbow fentanyl. So yes, there is rainbow fentanyl. No, it's not made to look like candy. It's made to look like oxycodone pills that exist. Pharmaceutical companies in this country love to make medication that looks snappy and colorful. And I don't want to say necessarily like candy, but it's just the way they do this. I still can't find any real reason why an opioid manufacturer would say, oh, I want to make my pill a bright yellow or a bright purple or something like that. Now, I also did see recently a news story where there was illicit fentanyl pills found in boxes of candy. So that is absolutely happening. If you were to open a box, like the best one I saw was a box of Whoppers. I don't know if anybody is familiar with Whoppers, malted milk balls. Candy junkie like myself, I could probably do a whole webinar on Whoppers. But that's beside the point. But the second you look inside the box, you know it's not Whoppers. It's not even the same size, shape, or color. So a lot of the times we're seeing it in candy boxes is just they're trying to make it easier to smuggle into the country, hoping that a box of candy is a little less scrutinized than I don't know, whatever else they decide to stash it in. And it's usually stashed in boxes of real things that have been emptied out and replaced with this. If you've ever seen my emerging threat report webinars, I found some interesting stories about the way they smuggle methamphetamine to the country. It's kind of insane. I do a whole webinar on that too. Excuse me. So there is one other theory that some of the cartels will do, especially bright or specific colors in order to gain a foothold marketing wise. But the idea that somebody is going to give your child an $80 or $30 or $50 drug for free, a child who probably doesn't have any means of buying more if they do indeed get addicted. I don't know what you got as an allowance as a kid, but I couldn't afford fentanyl if I wanted when I was a kid. So again, it's a way to smuggle it. It's a way in some cases to have it stand out from the other illicit drugs that are on the street. But mostly it's just because they want to mimic the legit medication that's sometimes black marketed. And that's why it's so dangerous. You think you're getting, let's say you're an addict taking 30 milligrams of oxycodone every time you take a dose. That 30 milligram oxycodone you just bought off the street could be almost all fentanyl. And that could be way more of a high dose than what you're used to taking and dangerous, if not deadly. But above all else, the big takeaway here is fentanyl is still the number one designer opioid in the US. And all the numbers I can find say, unfortunately, it is still continuing to go up. That's just a trend I don't know that we're going to get away from in a while. Hopefully we do, but it's not looking good at the moment. Listen, and I don't tell you this because I want you to be scared. I tell you this because I want you to be safe. So keep that in mind. All right, looks like I have a couple, no, just a question. So let's go ahead and get to that. Can we get a printout of the slides? Yes, actually, this request will show up when I save this after the fact, and I'll look for this request, and I will go ahead and send you a digital copy. I'll email it to you. So hopefully your email is correct in our system. Let's see. Who creates the designer opioids? So basically, back when fentanyl first started, back when the fentanyl epidemic first started, it was 99 times out of 100, it was coming from labs in China. They were selling it as research chemicals. Whereas Chinese government had a pretty laissez-faire attitude with whatever you're producing. You're checking the certifications of the people you're selling it to. Great, hands off. Go ahead and send it all you want. Once the U.S. and China worked together to start cracking down on fentanyl being shipped to the U.S. or to Mexico, the cartels took over, and they've got basically super labs, much like they did from Breaking Bad when we talk about methamphetamine. They're able to produce this stuff probably now even more cheaply than they were getting it from China. So now I would say the bulk of it does indeed come from Mexican cartels. And, again, the bulk of illicit substances comes through checkpoints. That's why they're always hidden in other products. If you're trying to, to smuggle anything to make it worth your risk and your time, your money, and your effort, you're not sending one guy climbing the wall with 50 pills in his pocket. You're sending a big semi, and half of it's cantaloupes and half of it's fentanyl. That's the real way to get it done, and that's usually what we see. That's why so much of the numbers of confiscations in the border are going up, because it's just that more prevalent. There's a lot of commerce that goes across the border, so that's kind of to be expected, unfortunately. All right, I don't see any more questions. And most likely what's going to happen is you're going to remember as soon as I log off. So if that's the case, just know when your consultant reaches out, take a few minutes to talk to them. If you want any more information on this or any other thing that you think would be helpful, please let us know. The recording of the webinar usually posts usually within 24 hours or so after we complete. So if you know a friend or colleague who wasn't able to join us today, just know they can go to our website and view the recording, or reach out to me or your representative, and we'll make sure that we get you a link so you can watch it and share it with them. And as always, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate you guys coming out, spending a few minutes with me, and I hope you learned something helpful for you or something interesting, if nothing else. And hopefully we see you at the next one. Thank you very much and have a great day.